Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar about your VAD, creating a tool for VISTA success. We're going to explore the VISTA assignment description, which we call the VAD, in a lot of detail, looking at its purpose, its structure and framework, and how you can use this tool to help your VISTA project thrive. Simply put, the VAD is a description of activities for the VISTA member, along with objectives and goals. But it's so much more. And we'll explore this today so that you'll be able to say, I'm glad about our VAD. My name is Eric Powell, and I'm an AmeriCorps VISTA training specialist with the Corporation for National and Community Service. I proudly served as a VISTA member in 2006 and a VISTA leader in 2008, and I'm extremely happy to be with you today to be talking about VISTA assignment description, something I've had quite a bit of experience with. Today, I will be co-presenting content as well as co-facilitating our chat activities throughout the session and the live question and answer session at the end of the session. And I'm also very pleased to have with us today Mike and Steve from our partners at LSI. They'll be managing the Zoom technology. Feel free to give them a shout out in the chat panel as we appreciate their assistance with many things, including posting websites in the chat panel that you can copy and paste into your web browser, as well as posting some chat questions and other information for us today. The topic of VADs could take many days to fully explore, but in this short time we have together, we focus the content around two goals. We expect that this session will help you to really understand the components of a VAD and what is needed to make an effective VAD, and to write objectives and member activities that reflect VISTA's focus on capacity building and community engagement. And very happily helping us reach these goals and really get into the content of what makes a VISTA assignment description effective is our guest speaker, Kathy Lenz of Development Plus Incorporated. Kathy has been working with AmeriCorps VISTA members and sponsors since 1998 to help members begin their service and identify specific steps that they can take to succeed in what they are doing for their community and their organization. She has a wealth of experience reviewing VISTA assignment descriptions, crafting well-written goals and objectives, general writing, and simply getting the job done with our program. And in addition to VISTA, she wears many hats, including working with nonprofits across the United States and on multiple continents. Her current focus is on expanding her Financially Savvy Nonprofits online training program and her frequent posts regarding fundraising and organizational management on her LinkedIn page and her Financially Savvy Nonprofits Facebook page. So I'm so grateful to have Kathy with us, and I'll go ahead and turn over the presentation to her. Kathy, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to thank everyone for submitting their questions about the VADs when you registered and at the start of this session. I'm going to be answering some of these in the session today, and as Eric mentioned, I'm going to ask you to use the chat panel throughout the presentation so that you can ask questions, and we'll get to some of those during this presentation. Some of them we've tried to weave in, and others at the end of the session. We have designed this so that you'll have time to interact with both Eric and I, especially through the chat panel. Now, here's a quick review of some points we covered in the webinar about your VAD, understanding the big picture to get you started. The first one that we had. Let's keep in mind VISTA's mission, which is to strengthen organizations that alleviate poverty through the mobilization of volunteers and resources. To do this, there are 4 key program principles that apply to all VISTA members' service, which you'll want to reflect in the VADs. These are, and they'll show up on the left-hand side, the key principles. The 2 bookends that we started with is ending poverty and creating sustainable solutions. Those are the 2 core ones. And then from there, how do we do this? We do it by empowering communities and building capacity. So when you're writing a VAD, you want to keep these core principles in mind. Now, let's take a look on the right-hand side here. We will look at the legs of the stool, which take up program sustainability. These are the systems and the infrastructure that VISTAs work with in their projects. It's the capacity building part of the service. So you're going to see things like the communication capacity, which is the technology, program capacity, human capacity, financial capacity. When supervisors and sponsors work with VISTA members and leaders to develop processes, systems, or other types of resources, they are creating these sustainable solutions in these 4 core areas. One more thing I'm going to point out, I'd like you to notice the gray band that holds the legs together. It's held together by the work and involvement of the community and other stakeholders. That's the community engagement. Engaging with the community is part of the VISTA program's long-term goal of applying good community development principles. Altogether, all of this creates the pathway to sustainability. But now here's the catch. VISTA members are not responsible for program sustainability. The sponsors, the supervisors, and the organizations are. But VISTAs can contribute to sustainability, and supervisors can write their VADs so that VISTAs serve with an eye towards sustainability. You want to think about this project with that big picture in mind. We should start with some basics about what a VISTA assignment description or VAD is. The VISTA assignment description is the foundation on which the entire VISTA member experience is built. Presenting a VISTA member with a strong VAD from the start of service ensures the members know what they will be working on. The VAD details the activities a VISTA member will perform during their year of service, and it gives them the goals and the objectives of the project. VISTA sponsors must fill out a VISTA assignment description or VAD form for each VISTA member who serves on a VISTA project. Those VADs are written per year per assignment. So, for example, a 3-year project will require 3 separate VADs, one for each VISTA. And a project with several VISTA members in the same year will require a unique VAD for each VISTA member. Today, we will review the key elements that make up an effective VAD that'll guide members to build capacity and engage community in the organization where they will be serving.
Thank you, Kathy. And by now you should see a poll appearing on your screen. And keep in mind, as it comes up, you may need to use the scroll bar to see all of the options. We'd like you to go ahead and answer the question. It's a pretty quick poll. How do you currently use the VISTA assignment description? I see a lot of responses coming in. You can see your answers are outreach and recruitment, selecting a VISTA candidate, guiding and supporting members, assessing performance, other. And if you select other, please type your response in the chat. Or maybe you haven't yet created a VAD because it's a new project, or perhaps you're on this webinar and you don't directly work with VADs, but you might be other VISTA project staff. Whether you created VADs, will be creating VADs, or maybe you just inherited VADs from a previous supervisor, it's important that you know how essential this tool is. People use the VAD for a variety of reasons, and we want to know your uses for the VAD, especially if you have other ways that you make use of this tool in your VISTA project. So it looks like all of the responses have come in, so we'll go ahead and close the poll and take a quick look at the results. Kathy, based on what you see, does anything surprise you? Anything shock you?
I don't know that it's so much a surprise or shock, but there's a beautiful mixture there. They're pretty closely spread out among all of them. So that tells me that you're really taking a careful look of how can we be engaging with our members. By the way, the #1 choice was guiding and supporting members with 57%. But that's a wonderful mix that I see. So I'm really happy to see that, and that we're going to keep that in mind as we talk about this a little bit further.
And for those of you who have not yet created a VAD, I see there's about 15% of you. Hopefully the information in this webinar will give you the key tools you need to successfully do that. We also want to make sure that you see the connection and the trajectory of the VAD from its importance with promoting your VISTA positions and recruiting, moving on to screening and interviewing applicants, to preparing candidates for VISTA service, then segueing to onboarding and orienting your members, and as many of you mentioned, supporting and reviewing the performance of your members during their service, as well as using the VAD to help you track accomplishments to put in your reports and document accomplishments and next steps for your VISTA project. Look at the VAD as a tool that has numerous uses all throughout the life of your VISTA project.
Okay, we have got a wonderful visualization, a graphic here that really helps us, show what we were just talking about. Just so today's participants know, we talked about this in greater detail in the webinar about your VAD, understanding the big picture to get you started. This graphic captures some of the core ways we can use a VAD to help make the VISTA service year more productive for the site and for the VISTA member, and it will lead to project success. I'm going to start on the left side of the slide. As you all just noted, the VAD has multiple uses, both before the VISTA member starts at their site, which is the recruitment and the selection process, once they arrive, which is the performance and the reporting, and after they leave, record keeping of past progress and the future action items for another VISTA member or for the organization. Keeping these uses in mind will help you create a better VAD, thinking about how you want to do each of those. So with this in mind, supervisors can use the VAD to frame a few important conversations with the VISTA member. For each VISTA member, a VAD explains a project position and the role assigned to that particular member. VADs are used as a learning and orientation tool during the VISTA member orientation, and especially during the on-site orientation and training, or what we refer to as the OSAT. It's something that you conduct for your members in the first couple of weeks of service. Another one is that a complete VAD includes the goals, objectives, and capacity building activities a member is expected to complete in order to satisfy project needs. If we have written it well, it helps translate the milestones that we've talked about in our proposal into a realistic set of activities. The VAD helps VISTA members create an action plan with their service activities for the year of service. It's essential for their direct supervisor to be fully aware of what the VAD is and what it says, so they can support the VISTA member with any questions they may have. A VAD also indicates project priorities, organizational and community challenges, and the purpose of the project. It also helps the supervisors keep in mind that the VAD is a living document. Now, this comes up with something that people asked about in their questions. The VAD evolves and can be adapted as the project evolves. And when the unique strengths of the VISTA member become apparent, significant changes, however, to the VAD should be discussed with your CNCS state or regional office, because before any of those changes can take place, they need to sign off on those. The last thing I want to mention is that the VAD also aids you in recruiting for your VISTA positions. It helps you track the VISTA member's performance, and it helps with reporting on the achievements and accomplishments. As you can see, the VAD really does play an integral and central role in your VISTA project.
Now that you know what a VAD does, take a minute now in the chat panel to answer the question, where do I find the information that goes into the VAD? This question has come up sometimes from previous sponsors and VISTA supervisors, and we want you to think about the elements and the components of the VAD and where you as the VISTA supervisor or project sponsor staff will need to get the information to put in the VISTA assignment description.
I wanted to make sure that we included this one, Eric, because I often hear that when I work with the supervisors directly at some of their past orientations. It's like, well, where am I supposed to find all this information to to create all this? That's what we're asking you to take a look at and just give some thought to. And if any of you are uncertain because you're like, I'm a little new at this, I'm not sure, take some notes of some of the other responses that come up.
So I'm not seeing any responses yet, but they should be coming in soon. And again, the question we're looking at is, where do I find the information that goes into the VAD? I saw someone earlier posted that they can get some of it from the VISTA project application that they submitted when they applied to be a VISTA project, which is a great answer because obviously if you're submitting a concept paper and an application to become a VISTA project, there's details in there about what you hope to accomplish over the course of your VISTA project, which much of that would ultimately flow into a VISTA assignment description. Kathy, what else are you seeing?
At this moment, it's a little light on this side, but that may mean that it's an important, oh, the chat was disabled. Okay. So there was a note here because I saw a number of hands go up. So for some reason, the chat was disabled, so they couldn't come into that. Now they're coming in. Previous VADs. I see a hooray. Yes, it's back on again. So thank you. Thank you all. I was, for a little there, I'm like, boy, I'm pretty sure they do know where this all comes from. So I'm glad to see it's coming on in. You know, VISTA Campus, the state's office, the portfolio, the grant application, sponsored notes. They've got it, Eric. They know where this stuff's coming from.
This is great, and we'll be responding to some of those comments in the chat in a bit. We do want to make sure that you remember that the supervisor, project director, or approved VISTA project staff manage all things VISTA in eGrants, including the VISTA assignment description. If you need guides and resources for eGrants, this session will not cover it, but you can click on the link that we'll post in the chat again, but you can also go to the VISTA Campus website and search for eGrants. That's probably your one and best place to get more information about how to use eGrants effectively.
So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the key elements that go into a VAD. We're going to use a sample VAD as our basis for the example in this session. The organization in the sample is called the Waukita Community Services, or WCS. They run a youth mentoring program. The resources we share will be posted along with the recording in approximately a week from now, and it'll be on the VISTA Supervisor webinar pages of the VISTA campus. As VISTA headquarters staff update VAD resources and materials, they will post them on the VISTA campus once they are finalized, and they're there to help you write, edit, and maintain your VADs. So the first part I want to point to is the title and the details. When you're looking at a VAD, each VAD you create should have a distinct title. If you happen to be creating multiple similar VADs, consider creating a naming system. This might include attributing the year and the community or creating a job number in addition to the descriptive title. I just want to note that we don't really want a community name in the title, and we don't want acronyms in the title. But it would be wonderful if you could please include the name of the word VISTA and make sure that it in fact is engaging. Our tip for you, as we're looking at the title and details, when you're creating multiple VADs for VISTA members who are doing similar work, you can save time by copying and pasting some of the elements of the text into those VADs. Keeping in mind, however, that each VAD requires its own title because each VISTA gets a VAD unique to them and their work. The VAD requires you to put the program details such as the program name, project period, number of members, etc. Much of this information can be found in your project application. Conveniently, your application is available within your organization's eGrant account, so you can easily copy and paste the appropriate content. You will want the member to see the overall program goal along with the concrete objectives and specific activities to accomplish them. The activities work to accomplish the objectives, which work to meet the goal. Let's take a look at these project goals. The VAD should reflect the following: the poverty mission of the project and activities that clearly show how the VISTA member will build capacity at the organization or in the community. You will want to make sure that the project goal is clear and concise in order to guide the project. Generally, there is only one or at most two goals in a VAD. And keep in mind, the goals don't change. Now, let's take a moment and review this example of a project goal. Can you spot how this project addresses poverty? If you said, you know, the children of incarcerated parents receive the additional educational, social, and emotional support they need to help break the cycle of poverty, you got it. How does a VISTA build capacity? Where's that in our example? If you said by developing a sustainable volunteer recruitment and management system for its mentoring programs, that's it. That's what we're looking for to make it sure that it's really present there in the goal. And our tip for you is copy and paste the goal of the project directly from the goal statement in your project plan, which is part of the project application. Now, let's talk about the objectives and the member activities. The objectives, which are on the left side of the arrow, you identify for the VAD. They should actually articulate what the VISTA member will achieve during his or her assignment. It describes the big chunks of their work. Each VAD should include more than one objective and include completion dates for each one. The objectives should form a bridge between your goal statements and that particular VISTA member's activities. So on the right-hand side are the member activities. For right now, we're going to stay focused on the left, but we'll come back to those member activities later in our session. Here's a sample from our VAD. We're saying that by January 2021, plan outreach systems and build partnerships with community organizations in order to spread the word about the mentor program. Develop targeted marketing materials. So here's our tip. Check that what you've written aligns with your goal statement. That is, look back and make sure that there's a connection between the goal statement and the objective that you've written, that first chunk that's going to help build and create and finish with that goal. Also check that you've included a completion date. This helps Vistas plan their time and understand what the priority is for each quarter of their work. In our particular case, our example includes both of those key components. So this next piece is the VISTA assignment description framework in order to help really strengthen our objectives. It's my handy tip to you based on having spoken to supervisors in a number of our sessions. We talked about ways that we could strengthen our VADs and make it easier to create VADs. We realized that getting our VADs right made it a lot easier. And so we came up with this particular VAD framework for 3 levels of objectives. The first is to assess. This is the introductory stage of the VISTA's work, when they're first getting started at your agency. The second is to act. This is the specific capacity building action we want VISTA members to do. And the third is to transfer. This helps VISTA members and the sites complete the circle so that sites can use what the VISTA members have done for long-term success. We're going to break these down and give you some more specific examples. Looking first at level 1, the assess. Often I have seen supervisors list the words attend meetings on their VADs, which in fact is an activity that VISTA members will do. But really, writing attend meetings doesn't add anything to the VISTA members' understanding about the capacity building that you want them to do. And so when I would see that, I would ask the supervisors, why? Why do you want them to attend meetings? And the list that you see here are some of their main explanations. Supervisors were trying to help their VISTA members start the work successfully. And so they said things like, I want the VISTA members to assess the current state of our volunteer systems, or our fundraising and development work, or our communications and marketing, or our partnership, or our technology. Choose whatever ones are relevant to your project, but some of you may be seeking that same thing. They need to know and assess where we are right now. The second point they brought out was they wanted them to identify and understand the key players and their part in addressing the community issues. Or as they said, I wanted to make sure that the VISTA members understand the historical environment of the project and the community. And they also added, I want the VISTA members to discuss how members of the target community will be engaged in leadership and implementation of this project. That's the heart of the community engagement component. They said things like, I want them to learn more about the targeted community, what they need and what they want. So remember, VISTA members look at the VAD at your initial interview with them. They look at it again during their member orientation and at their in-service training if they attend one. They're trying to understand what you're asking them to do. And frankly, if it's unclear, the VISTA members tend to get really nervous, upset, and they tend to give up. And they may not complete the year. And that's not something any of us want.
So the chat question that we have for you now is, what objectives would you add to your VISTA assignment description to address the assess level of the objective?
I realize for some folks this will be new. Supervisors have talked about this work in earlier stages of a VISTA's year, but none of them have never actually written it as formal objectives. So we're just inviting them to take a look. And just a reminder, don't worry about getting it exactly right. Now is the time to brainstorm, have some fun with it, see what you and your fellow participants come up with. Keep in mind, these can be used later when you're actually writing your VADs. The purpose of the objectives is to articulate what the VISTA member will achieve during his or her assignment. What do you want them to achieve at this early stage of their VISTA year? I see a lot of good brainstorming happened there, Eric. Talking
Yes,
about the community
indeed.
needs assessment, talking about the transportation programs, the background of the project, an inventory list tool and tool.
More needs assessment, explore objective that looks at those objectives. That's great. Yeah, a lot of people talking about community needs assessment, which is an essential thing, because how do you help the community solve its problems if you don't know what their needs are?
Great work, folks. This is exactly the kind of things that we're looking at in this first level, making sure that they can assess and know where they're starting from. So when it's time to create the final objectives for your VAD, hopefully you'll review some of these same ideas that we've created here and ask yourself, when you're getting to that final writing point, what will make this even more clear and more focused on what the member will achieve? And use it to help you examine the objectives you may already have in your VAD to see if they need any adjustments. Let's go ahead and move to the level 2 of the objectives for the VAD. In this particular level, we're talking about the ACT. It's about creating tools and processes. These are the ones most supervisors will be familiar with. They go back to those 4 legs of the sustainability stool that we talked about earlier. So let's say, for example, if we were doing fundraising or fund development, we might have VISTA members who, when it comes to creating tools, create a database of potential donors with due dates, contact information, or application procedures. Maybe they create a template for grant applications by program, or they create branding for all communication materials and a guide that will define what that is. Perhaps they create talking points as on a sheet that can actually guide volunteers and staff when they're on a call to make an ask for donations. Those are possible tools. Processes, they might be creating a training for volunteers on how to make the ask, or create the schedule for volunteers and staff to meet with potential donors. On the screen, you're going to see an example of a level 2 objective from our sample VAD. Note all of these activities are capacity building direct and not direct service. We're saying on here, by February 2021, set up outreach systems and build partnerships with community organizations in order to spread the word about mentor programs, develop targeted marketing materials. I mentioned that about the capacity building component, not direct service, so that we can really think about what we're putting in place. On the next slide, we're going to talk about and show the difference between those. Since some of us may not fully understand what we mean by capacity building, let's focus on that particular part that's on the left-hand side. Capacity building, in essence, is about helping your organization do more with what they have so they can serve more people or operate more efficiently. It's the tools and processes I just mentioned.
And direct service is about providing tangible assistance directly to those who need it. Direct service, for example, planting a community garden or teaching a literacy course, are not the focus of the AmeriCorps VISTA program. VISTA is unique in this regard from the other streams of service. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about the capacity building activities in your VADs.
The chat question is, what are some of the examples of capacity building activities the VISTAs can be doing? I'm going to ask you to jot those in the chat box. Whether you're using examples from the VAD you have or thinking about specific activities members can do, please add those in and list those so that we can share that with everybody here. Remember, these should be real life activities that are specific, understandable, and focus on achieving the VISTA project's objective and goal.
A lot of responses coming in, recruiting youth for workshops, creating spreadsheets for health contacts, a lot of communication, which is useful.
A lot of volunteer work and how they're going to work with the volunteers.
Training volunteers, yep, that's a useful resource, especially if you have regular volunteers who will be there for a while. More recruiting, creating a resource development database, absolutely, so that there's more sustainable contact and information for the project to continue when the VISTA leaves. Developing case studies, these are great.
A nice mixture there.
Definitely. And as you continue to think about this, you want to examine your draft activities and carefully ask yourself, is this an activity that really builds capacity instead of directly serving clients? Utilize all the resources available to you to help you do this, whether on the VISTA campus. You can find recorded webinars, resources, and more, along with communicating information with your CNCS state or regional office.
Now I want to take us to the next level, which is the transfer component. As supervisors, we need to keep our eye on the sustainability. And when I talk to VISTA members, I talk about all the capacity building activities they'll be doing. You just talked about a bunch of these: writing grants, doing the assessments, recruiting volunteers, creating databases. All of that builds capacity. But projects need to think about sustainability, having that eye towards sustainability, that something that lasts beyond the VISTA members 1 year of the project. And that's that transfer of knowledge, products, and relationships. It's what takes it to the next step. So when I'm talking about transfer of knowledge, let's say that our VISTA member recruited volunteers, something you all talked about. That's a wonderful thing. But here's the question. Who else knows how to do that after the VISTA member is gone? Another example, a VISTA member creates a database. Wonderful, so helpful. Who else knows how to create or update a database after the VISTA member is gone? The question becomes, who can the VISTA member train so that this can continue after the VISTA member leaves? That's that transfer of knowledge. When we talk about the transfer of product, what products can the VISTA member leave behind for the organization and community to use? What step-by-step instructions, what training manuals, what pre-made training videos could be left? And when we're talking about transfer relationships, let's say that a VISTA member recruited those volunteers. The volunteers join because they like the person who recruited them. How are VISTA members connecting the volunteers to the organization so that they stay when the VISTA member leaves? Let's say that a VISTA member got new donors. Bravo, great job. But here's the thing, relationship building is critical to getting and keeping donors. How have VISTA members connected the donors to the organization? That's really the question we've got to ask. How can VISTA members connect these folks to the staff and volunteers who are continuing the work after they're gone? That's that transfer of relationship. So in our example, we included this, setting up training for our new volunteer coordinator. You know, we're talking about in November 2021, we're going to set up that. When we do it, that should hopefully help us transfer knowledge, potentially transfer products if we provide a training manual, and transfer of relationship if we organize a social so the volunteers can meet the new volunteer coordinator. So I'm just wondering, what do you have your VISTA members do in this transfer section to ensure the sustainability of your program? We're going to ask you to go ahead and put this in the chat box. Let us know what kind of things you might add or address and change in your VAD to make sure that there's a transfer of the activities.
As we wait and see some responses coming in, I have a feeling that people are going to get this pretty well. They seem like they know the information. So a lot of how-to manuals and procedural documents so that the sustainability around process, different guides and job aids, a sustainability binder, a lot of people put those together, more guides, office and community presentations, which are good so that after the VISTA leaves, they can transfer that presentation to someone else to take over, legacy binder, step-by-step procedures, exactly. There are some things that seem obvious, but step-by-step procedures, even for easy stuff, is really, really critical.
I am going to put one note in here, Eric. One of the things that I've had people say is, well, I'll hand off the database or I'll hand off the binder. When it comes to the transfer of relationships, a face-to-face meeting works way better than just handing off the data. It's about actually helping make that human connection. So I'd always invite people to think about, how am I helping to create that human connection with volunteers, with donors, with partners, and so forth. I'm just going to invite, mention on here, sustainability is the ability of a program or organization to continue engaging community stakeholders to meet the needs of the community efficiently and effectively after the last VISTA member is gone. That's what we're shooting for when we do this work. So that's the framework that we talked about. I'm going to come back to our slides here where we talk about objective and member activities. We're going to look at the member activities, which is on the right side of the arrow. The activities section of the VAD identifies in greater detail what VISTA members will be doing to achieve their objectives. The member activities and objectives should feed into each other and roll up to meet the designated project goal. So our tip to you is to start with the performance milestones in the action plan section of your project application and edit them into appropriate activities. Let's think what this would actually look like. So when you consider the flow of the goals to the objectives, now it's time to think about the member activities. What specifically are you asking them to do? Sometimes sponsors have challenges about how to articulate it so it makes sense to the VISTA members. Notice if you're using jargon or abbreviations, it can cause confusion and misunderstanding. For example, I was doing a training and a VISTA came up to me and she said, do you have any idea what asset mapping is? And I said, well, yes, actually I do, but terms like that, they were just not familiar with. So we're going to share with you an example in our particular case from our sample VAD, and we'd ask you to put your answers in the chat. Our objective that we're given here, by January 2021, plan outreach systems and build partnerships with community organizations in order to spread the word about the mentor program, develop targeted marketing materials. What are some of the member activities a VISTA member could do for this objective? We'd ask you to jot those in the chat box. Don't worry about perfection. Sometimes this is the easiest part of just brainstorming it and making it up as we go, as we're first trying to get our ideas down.
So one person says make flyers. That's definitely a step in terms of reaching this objective. Attending community meetings, again, as Kathy mentioned, you want to know for yourself why. What's the purpose in attending the meeting? It's not that it's a bad thing, but what's the ultimate outcome? More flyers and define and identify partners. Great. Partners that can become stakeholders. Absolutely.
They're adding some great ones in there.
Still see quite a few coming in. Researching information for our neighborhoods to utilize, building presentations, researching effective outreach strategies, absolutely. And again, as Kathy mentioned, you want to make sure that these do clearly connect to the objectives. It's important, of course, to continually think about how the activities and the objectives align. It not only helps you craft a better VISTA assignment description, but really helps the VISTA member better understand the connection between the activities that they're doing on a day-to-day basis and furthering the organization's mission and how it fits in with the overall VISTA project.
I wanted to make sure that we included some other tips. Begin your activity sentences with active verbs. Use words like launch, market, research, collect, assess, compile. And Eric, I believe that we're putting together a list of active verbs within our attachments as well. We want to make sure that we're specific and but yet keep it simple. We have to strike that balance between specifics and simplicity. If the activities listed in the VAD are too general, the VISTA member won't understand what he or her is supposed to do. But on the other hand, if there's too much detail in the activities, innovation and flexibility might be stifled. Ideally, a VAD would be 2 to 3 pages long. Now, I want to mention that because eGrants only ask for 1 paragraph, but that's too short. But on the other hand, I have had VISTA show up to training sessions and they have 12 pages. That is way too long, too much we filled them. So we just actually think about like, what can we do to keep it in that 2 to 3 page range? Make sure that we're realistic, avoid over ambitious sets of activities. This is important so that we're empowering them to feel capable and successful in their assignments. For example, I was working with some supervisors and one of them raised their hand and they said, Kathy, I inherited this VAD and it says that they're going to recruit 100 volunteers in the first month. And we all looked at each other and said, really? Yeah, didn't really see that happening. So what can we do to make sure it's realistic? Try to delineate the work for each year, differentiating your VAD for each year of the project, you know, so that the tasks in year 1, which may be like creating systems or other startup tasks, might differ substantially from those in year 3, which may be training volunteers to carry on the project or other winding down activities. So we want to identify how the project will progress and demonstrate a specific plan for achieving those objectives. So far, we've been doing the creative thought part of the process. We've been brainstorming, coming up with some possible ideas. But now this is the format for the actual writing the objectives and member activities in the VAD. What you're going to see on this slide, when we talk about the objective, it clearly indicates what is the time frame, when is it going to happen, and then we're telling them what specifically they will be accomplishing. Underneath that, when we talk about the member activities, it's talking about what activities will contribute to accomplishing the objectives. In some cases, you might even have sub-activities if you need to clarify a little more. Once we have our brainstorm list of items, we can clean them up and put them into this proper format. We will post a link to additional VAD resources on the VISTA campus in the chat. And remember that you can access this and more information by downloading the helpful links document from the handout panel of today's webinar.
And I will make sure the handouts panel is available either at the end of this webinar or I will email it to everyone. Apologize for the technical glitches. In terms of VADs, I do want to quickly add a reminder here that, as you know, this program, like anything that's funded by taxpayer dollars, we must ensure that the program is well run, doing what it's supposed to, and spending money wisely. So it's essential that you ensure that these red flagged actions are not in the VAD. Taking over the work of staff, such as someone who left the organization, is considered replacing staff and it is not allowed. Also, mostly doing administrative support for someone else or performing other activities not related to the VAD are also not appropriate work for a VISTA member because the VISTA, as Kathy mentioned, should be focused on capacity building activities. Direct service. Even if you feel that a small amount of direct service may be necessary at the beginning of the service year, just to help the VISTA member understand their capacity building work. The VAD should not contain any direct service because the majority of your VISTA service activities should be capacity building, and the Inspector General does frown upon any direct service outlined in a VAD. And also, you want to make sure that the VAD does not include any political activities, including voter registration, does not include any religious activities, including providing religious instruction or conducting worship services. Also, VISTA members are not allowed to administer the organization's AmeriCorps programs, supervise AmeriCorps members, or staff. Again, we want to remind you of the rules of the Hatch Act, which applies to all federal employees and VISTA members, as well as the Domestic Volunteer Service Act of 1973 as amended, and additional federal regulations. Finally, we do mention to VISTA members that if they have any questions or concerns about their VAD, they should go directly to their direct supervisor. If they can't get an answer or still have questions, they can reach out to their CNCF state or regional office. And of course, if they would like to remain anonymous or if they have anything else they would like to disclose, they can feel free to reach out to the CNCF Office of Inspector General in that preferred order. Be sure that your VISTA project is in compliance with VADs appropriate for VISTA service. So let's move on to highlight some resources before we get to the next steps, the evaluation and questions. As we do talk about transferring knowledge, products, and relationships, we need resources to do so. There's a couple highlighted on the screen. the VISTA assignment description with general information as part of the VISTA sponsor handbook. There's a VAD training manual for VISTA sponsors, and there's a section called Using VADs Throughout Your Project. You can also just search the VISTA campus for VAD and find a lot of other resources. So moving on to the next steps, I'll ask Kathy, what's the first next step that we would like to provide to our attendees?
As you're thinking about your next steps, review your existing VADs with a critical eye to make sure it only contains capacity building activities.
Create a customized VAD for each member to help them understand their specific activities.
Add the date ranges to each objective to give you and your VISTA members an idea of when things should be completed.
Be sure to detail out the member activities and make sure they're clear and understandable for each objective so that they know how various actions will lead to accomplishing the objective.
Update your VADs that are out of date and make sure they're still relevant and include the things needed by your VISTA project and the community. Remember to maintain up-to-date VADs and e-grants and work with your CNCS state or regional office to get the approval for a revised VAD.
Ensure that every candidate has an up-to-date VAD and a complete VAD before they start service because they'll need it in their VISTA member orientation, during the on-site orientation and training, and throughout the life of their service as a VISTA member. So we would like you to please provide your feedback on the session and let us know what you thought. We truly look for your comments on this webinar and suggestions for future webinars. It's a fairly brief survey and you should see the link posted in the chat in a minute. Please take the time now or later today to provide your feedback on this webinar, as well as posting comments as to what recommendations you have for future webinar topics. We do take a look at that and use that to inform future webinar subjects. And speaking of future webinars, we want to quickly highlight our next monthly VISTA sponsor supervisor webinar. Will be on Tuesday, June 16th, and the subject is giving more thought to your OSOT, your on-site orientation and training. We'll provide tips, tricks, and tools as to how you can put more thought into your training as you onboard VISTA members, as you bring them up to speed, and really focus on helping to motivate them, engage them, and retain them as VISTA members. So the link will be posted in the chat for you to register, and it'll be posted on the VISTA campus as well. So while you take a look at those things and complete the evaluation, we do want to take time to answer a few of your questions. I know there were a couple that came in the chat that we'll answer in a minute. I'll turn it over to Kathy because I believe she had a question that we wanted to address first before we move on to the other questions.
Eric, when I looked at the ones that came in just before we started, we had a number of people who said, but what about changes? Like what happens during changes? We recognize that the VAD is a living document. What we'd ask folks to think about if there are changes, if you realize, for example, that your VISTA has particular skills that you didn't know about when you wrote that VAD, we'd always ask you to remember the chain of command. So let's say that you're a sub-site and you have a VISTA serving there. Before you make changes to their VAD, you need to actually talk to your sponsoring organization or the intermediary organization. And the reason that you do is because that intermediary or sponsor organization has a memorandum of agreement with the CNCS to say, we will accomplish these things. If you change the VAD, it could actually impact the performance measures that you're going to be looking at. So you want to make sure that you go up the chain so that not only at your site, but at the sponsor or intermediary organization level and the CNCS have actually signed off on those changes before you implement and get it into action.